everyone, welcome back. It's Melissa, and today I'm going to be sharing with you my list of my top 5 eyeshadow palettes. Obviously you're interested because perhaps you're looking to expand your own eyeshadow palette collection and adding a new neutral palette to it. No pressure, just saying. I wanted to give you a high end, a low end, and a couple in the middle. And once I get done going through my top 5, I have a couple other smaller specific recommendations at the end of the video if you're looking for something like a cool tone palette or a warm tone palette or something specific. So I have some additional recommendations at the very end because you know I have to give you a little something extra. So I have 2 palettes that I felt fell into the drugstore category. So while I say that, they're not that inexpensive considering drugstore palettes. They are in the $20 to $24 range. So the first one is the Sonia Kashuk Eye Couture Eye Palette, and this is the Eye on Neutral Mattes, and this will run you about 20 bucks. The other one is this Pixie Times It's Judy's Time palette, and this is a relatively new palette to the drugstore, well actually Target. And I do think it is limited edition. And this palette will run you $24 at Target. I think it's exclusively at Target, or maybe even on the Pixie website. So in this price range, I chose the Sonia Kashuk palette. It's all matte. It has such a great assortment of shadows. They're nicely pigmented, and they can take you from day to night. I actually chose this palette to use today and decided to do a smoky eye look. I'm kind of in a smoky eye mood lately. I don't know why. I wanted to do a smoky eye look today because just because it's a neutral eye palette doesn't mean it has to be natural looking. You can still get a pretty bold, dramatic look out of it. So I chose to do this smoky eye look today, and I really focused a lot with this gray shade on the mobile part of my lid. Alright, the next grouping is what I call like mid-range, and this is definitely my sweet spot. This is where I have the most palettes, and I'm going to just quickly hold them up in price order from the lowest to the highest, and then I'll go ahead and tell you which ones I considered to be my favorites. Prices vary between $29 to $46. The first one is the Naked Basics 2, and that's at the low end of the spectrum. Next up is the Too Faced Natural Eyes. Then I have the Tarte Rainforest of the Sea palettes, volume 1 and 2. I'm going to hold these up together. In case you haven't seen the other video, you can see how they compare. Then we have the Bare Minerals Ready Eyeshadow 8-pan palette, and this is called The Power of Neutrals. Followed by the Makeup Forever 9-pan Artist Shadow palette, and this is like in the nude range. Then we have the Lorac Pro 3 palette, the Visart Theory palette, and that's in the cashmere colors, and the first Tarte Tartlet palette. So since I was picking one low end, one high end, that leaves me only 3 choices for the mid-range. This was so extremely difficult because this really is my sweet spot. This is really where I tend to go for when I'm shopping for palettes, so this was hard for me. So the first one that I chose in this category is the very first Tarte Rainforest of the Sea palette. I just love the formula of these shadows. There's very little fallout. I think they're nicely pigmented, and there are some really great, one and done shadows if you want to, but you can create a whole like dark smoky look as well. This is probably one of my favorite shades in this palette. Then my next favorite is from Makeup Forever. I think this palette is pretty stunning. So one of the things I like about this palette is the way that it's organized. I always appreciate it when a brand organizes a palette in what seems to be a really smart way. And basically these are divided into like 3 different looks. Each column is a different look. So you know, if you're really new to makeup, you can kind of go just down. And one of the things I loved about this palette is there's nice warm and cool tones. There's some great mid-range tones that can also do like a one and done look as well. And then the last one in this category is the Tartelette palette. So some of the things I was talking about in the previous palette I think is also true with this palette. This one is organized really brilliantly across the rows this way. It's kind of a no-brainer for putting a look together. And for this palette they also include like a liner shade at the end, which you can use to make something really dark and smoky, or you can just use it as a liner, a really beautiful soft liner. These are all matte, and one of the other reasons why I liked this is it does give you this kind of neutral mauve-y row in the middle, which is a nice little spin, something a little bit different. So that brings us to the high end of the spectrum. And these prices range from $49 to $59. And the first one that falls into that category is the Too Faced Chocolate Bar Palette, Urban Decay Naked Smoky Eye Palette, and the Marc Jacobs Lolita Palette. This was super hard because I have two in this category that I really love. I really love the Marc Jacobs palette, and I really love this Smoky Eye palette from Urban Decay. I ended up choosing the Marc Jacobs palette because I felt like this was really dark. And when I think of a neutral eye palette, I don't think that many dark shades in it. So I chose this Marc Jacobs palette because I feel like it has everything in it. Some mattes, some shimmers, a little glittery top coat in the middle there, and just a really nice assortment of shades. And, you know, a shout out to the packaging, which I adore, even though mine's broken. Okay, so that's my top 5. So because I wanted to include a little extra content in this video, I also have a few bonus categories that I wanted to share with you in case you were looking for something a little bit more specific. So the first category is a palette that has a lot of great one and done shades. And, you know, there's something to be said for that. So I love doing a full-blown look, but sometimes, particularly on work mornings, I only have a time for a little brow bone and a one and done shade. And I chose this one from Lorac, the Pro 3, because it has some really awesome mid-tone shades in here that are great for getting one and done looks. And it is equal matte and shimmer, so I just think this is terrific. If you are someone who really loves warm tone eyeshadows or warm tone look, or you have warm undertones to your skin, you're going to want a palette that can play up on that. And I think the Too Faced Chocolate Bar palette really falls into that category. It has an awesome selection of warm tone shadows and a ton of choices in here. If you're relatively new to makeup and you just want a really simple, like matte eyeshadow palette, I would suggest picking up one of the Naked Basics palettes. There are two versions of this, the Naked Basics 1, the Naked Basics 2, and the difference between them is that the first one is a little bit warmer tone and the second one is a little bit cooler tone. And I prefer the cooler tone, and this is just like a no-fuss palette. So it's not too overwhelming, there's not too many shades in here that can overwhelm a new user. It's not too overwhelming for making a choice in the morning when you're getting ready, and that some of these are multiple purpose. You know, you have a liner shade in there. One of these mid-tone ones are probably good for your brows if you want to fill in your brows. So it can be a really good, you know, let's do everything palette. So I'm going to wrap up with a really lovely travel-friendly palette. Sometimes space is at a premium, and you want a palette that can take you from day to night. It has a nice offering of, you know, matte and shimmers, and can go dark and smoky or keep it light and neutral for the day. And for that, I chose this Vice Art Theory palette in the combination called Cashmere. They do have a couple different color combos. I happen to really like this one the best because I thought it was the most neutral. Some of the other ones that they have are less neutral. That's pretty profound. But for this, I like, you have this matte row, you have this shimmer row, and you can do just about any kind of look you want for traveling. So before I sign off, I would love to hear which palette you have in your collection that is your absolute favorite neutral eyeshadow palette. Share it below so that others can see and we can kind of expand the choices and the discussion. Agree or disagree with my suggestions. It's just eyeshadow palettes. Let's see what we come up with. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, click subscribe so you can join me for future videos, and I will see you next time. Take care. Bye.